I want you to think back for a moment and remember. Who introduced you to the great outdoors? How old were you? What aspect of the great outdoors were you introduced to? For most of us, I imagine it happened as kids. And it was probably an adult that made the introduction to us. And of course, great outdoors is not limited to hunting and fishing or camping and hiking. In fact, by the way, that's why this is Great Outdoors Sunday, not merely hunting and fishing Sunday. In fact, the great outdoors can be mama locking you outside during the summer so she can finally have some peace and quiet around the house. The great outdoors can be sports. Right, organized or pickup sports. The great outdoors could be chores out on the ranch, the farm, or just around the yard. For me, however, it was sports, organized and pickup sports. Now, growing up, our household did not do things like hunting and fishing, camping, and hiking. I was introduced to those late in high school, mostly in college and adulthood. But either way, like many of you, I just like being outside in the great outdoors, in God's great outdoors. But let's not overlook something in our reminiscing. Who introduced us to that stuff? For me, it was countless coaches, from Coach Green in elementary school all the way to Coaches Satchwell and McGlinchey in high school. For a lot of the other stuff, a lot of other great outdoor stuff, it was friends and their families. So what's in common with all those memories, yours and mine? Usually, it was an older, more experienced, more talented person took us under their wing, even picked us up and put us in their lap to serve us, to teach us, to lead us, to guide us, to keep us safe, to do their best to keep us away from the ditches on the sides and in the nice, broad middle. And they did that so that we could learn from their, I don't think it's too much to say, greatness. Even if our age and our experience and our talent now exceed theirs, they found greatness in our lives by serving us when we were still children, either by age or by ability. But that word, the greatest, is the rub, isn't it? Because what do we like to do, right? We like making being the greatest a contest. Right? Sports talk would disappear if we couldn't talk about who's the greatest. And by the way, it's still Michael Jordan, all right? For our sportsman, Warren Page, all right? But it's not just with the pros. We do it with ourselves. I mean, it just wouldn't be Hallettsville, would it? Without our local big butt contests or even our Kolache Queen and Miss Hallettsville every fall. And competition certainly isn't limited to the great outdoors. It's fun, and it leads us all to achieve more than we would all by our lonesomes. We love to witness the crowning of the next champ, to see the record set and broken, to keep our own personal bests and handicaps. In competition, even against ourselves, it's not wrong. It can get misguided sometimes. In fact, just this week I was talking to an elementary child who referred to themselves as dumb and no good because at the activity they were a brand new beginner and they couldn't achieve with their more experienced and practiced peer. And so rather than seeing the talent differential as an inspiration to serve one another, the kids saw it as social exploitation to devalue and to overvalue one another. Now I wish, if I had been there with those kids, that I would have had the sense to ask them, who's the greatest out here today? And of course, the high scorers would be picked. And I wish I would have had the sense, had I been there, to say, no, and then to go find one or two of the better kids who were actually helping the noobs achieve and lift that up. Now, I wish I could have done all that, honestly, but I would never have thought to do that. Right? Honestly, I wouldn't have thought of it because I'm not Jesus. I just work for him. You see, the irony of the disciples' self-esteem is that their argument comes right after their own epic failure. They had just been called out for their inability to heal a little boy. And let's remember the role that children played back in those days. It's quite different from today. Children were there to serve the adults, to do chores and so forth. They were completely dependent on the adults for everything needed in their everyday lives. And so Jesus, recognizing the irony, takes a child and brings it in front of the disciples and says that the greatest is the one who serves the least. A very common theme in his preaching. Indeed, it's exactly the story of Jesus' life, of his own life. The Son of God has been sent to serve us humans who are born captive to sin and failure, death and sickness, the devil and his evil. We're just as helpless as any child, despite our claims of greatness in this or that. Jesus serves us with nothing less than his own life, his very own body and blood given and shed on the cross, so that we may draw near to God and to his grace and his mercy and his love, that in drawing near to him we might know his forgiveness and his life and his salvation. But the key here is not that Jesus is an example for us. Rather, for those of us who have died to life as is, right? That's life ambitiously seeking to be the greatest, or maybe greater than, or certainly at least not as bad as someone else, right? For those of us who have been served a new life in Jesus, God's Son who came to be served, not to serve. Grace and mercy become our talent. Peace, gentleness, and a willingness to yield and forgive are our measure. St. James tells us to draw near to God because he has already drawn near to us, just as Jesus draws that child into his arms. In other words, we put our arms back around the one whose arms are already on us. Think about that. Remember those folks we mentioned earlier who introduced us to the great outdoors? How did they do it? By placing us in their midst, putting their arms around us, directing us how to do it. For baptized believers, greatness isn't found in what we do for ourselves. As baptized believers, greatness is measured in following Jesus by serving others, just as he served us. Drawing near to him, placing our arms around them as if they were Jesus' arms, and welcoming them into the great adventure of faithfulness. Amen.